me start this video off by saying I know next to nothing about Warhammer 40k. From my point of view, looks a lot like StarCraft, which may make a lot of you in the comments pretty angry. So I was like many of you when I heard about this product. I was not really excited. Magic has a very high fantasy appeal and art style. There's no guns, except for the pirate, no spaceships, except for the vehicles that are kind of ships. The point is, Magic is generally about a medieval type of weapons. You've got your swords, bows, crossbows, all kinds of stuff like that. You've got a much more medieval setting. So having something with guns and spaceships, it just seemed really off. And I wasn't really excited about it. You know, we have sets like Kaldheim that are all about Vikings, and Strixhaven, which breaks the mold a little bit, but it's still magic, you know? It's a magic school. Magic the Gathering has gone through lots of tones and shifts. If you look back to some of the earliest cards, they have Bible verses on them. Some of the most popular cards today still reference things like that. Swords to Plowshares is a good example of a card that references a phrase or quote in the Bible. When Wizards announced this set, it was a big deal because it was so out there as far as the Magic mythos goes. And I think a lot of us were pretty worried. So if you saw the title of this video, you know now that my opinion has changed on the matter. I was wrong about Warhammer 40k. Well, yes, the set doesn't have the same Magic aesthetic as every set, but the cards do look similar enough to Magic cards that it's not a huge deal, if that makes sense. The borders are a little bit different with the coloring, but the cards themselves, I think, are close enough that you could slot them in any commander deck, which was the big worry for commander players, that if I slot this Warhammer, Swarmlord in my deck, does it not look like anything else? Or the Emperor Calgus, or any of these cards. But I think in general, they look similar enough that it's not a huge deal, which I think is great. This is a great way to do it. There are a few cards that break the mold of what I'm talking about, but in general, I was worried it was going to be very much focused on the sci-fi, and it wouldn't feel like Magic. But they did a great job of merging the two IPs together, and I'm excited for future releases. The Lord of the Rings one is coming up next year, and I think that's the one I'm the most excited about. Partially because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and also just because it's very similar to Magic. You have elves already, you have dwarves, you have orcs, goblins. Tolkien's world and fantasy has pretty much been the basis for everything for the last, 50, 60 years, probably longer at this point, that almost every kind of dwarf elf is based off of Tolkien's work. And Magic is no exception. So I think it'll be really good to see what Magic does with this, and can't lie, I'm very excited to cast the One Ring. The only thing I'd have to say that I'm worried about these decks is the MSRP. Now, Wizards did a press release, I believe it was a year or two ago, where they said that they were getting rid of MSRPs, which is kind of a gross practice when you think about it. See, when Wizards has an MSRP, that means that you can call out scummy companies that are selling for over the MSRP. But if Wizards gets rid of this, you have no one to call out. There's no baseline. It could be whatever the company wants. Granted, you do have market competition with different companies, but why wouldn't they sell it for more if they can, as long as the market will buy it? The other problem is the limited printing of these Warhammer decks, and not knowing if these cards will be reprinted in any shape or form. Obviously, Wizards is out to make a profit. There's been no confirmation that these decks or any of these cards could be reprinted. We know that with Secret Layers, they've done that. They've reprinted a lot of the cards, but this is a lot bigger. There are 40 unique cards in every pre-constructed commander deck from the Warhammer decks. That's 40 pieces you've got to find places for. Now, a lot of them I think you could. A lot of the lands and mana rocks, but some of the more unique effects, especially the things that are pretty similar to Warhammer or have names of the Warhammer cards, I don't think you can do Warhammer versions in a Magic set without it feeling forced, I guess you could say. The other thing that I'm a little worried about that is FOMO with these products, which is also causing the high price increase. For those of you living under a rock, FOMO is fear of missing out. It's a human, probably biological need. Humans, we don't want to miss out on things, especially if it's a one-time thing. That's why sales are limited. If you ever watch YouTubers that sell merch, it's for this amount of time, this is the merch you can buy. Once you're past that, you're out of luck. Gives you that fear of missing out, which will get you to buy the product. And these decks, knowing that they're a limited print run, they may never be reprinted again, they have tons of unique cards, some of which are pretty powerful for Commander, creates an atmosphere where these decks are being sold for exorbitant amounts that is a little bit scummy, that I'm not a big fan of. So I hope that what Wizards can do is what they've done with Secret Layers, where they find places to reprint these cards, sometimes with magic art, especially with magic art. They did it with the Secret Layer Stranger Things, where they took those cards and they reprinted them to be only in set boosters of the Innistrad set. So you're able to get those cards in magic versions, which I love playing. I actually have some decks with some of those cards, and I don't love the Stranger Things art. I've never seen the show, and so for me, that was a great way for me to get those cards and the effects, but I could get them in a magic sense. So I'm hoping that Wizards will do that with these Warhammer decks. And all in all, I think these decks are great additions with cool, unique mechanics, and they're interesting new ways to take the game. I am concerned about the reprintability and the FOMO method being used, but I think Warhammer 40k is a success, and I'm excited to see the Lord of the Rings set next.